Story 1: Most vegetables. I think this is pretty common for people my age. My mom boiled them into mush. The only saving grace was the large amount of bacon grease. Surprisingly, most vegetables have textures and flavors that are enjoyable. Story 2: Onions. If they were visible, I would not eat any of that food. If it tasted too much like onions, the same would happen. Nowadays, I eat raw onions on buttered, salted, and peppered bread. Story 3: Fish. I did not actually hate it. I just refused to eat it because of the way the seafood section of the grocery store smelled. Story 4: Brussels sprouts. After I learned how to cook them properly instead of boiling them as my mother did. Story 5: Surprisingly, salads. As a child, I vowed to myself that I would never eat grass. Turns out I love salads. I feel like a new person. Story 6: Asparagus. I thought it was gross and mushy because my mother made it from a can. It turns out asparagus is excellent. Story 7: Tomato soup. I only liked it when I dipped grilled cheese in it. Now I love it. When I worked the first shift, being up at 4 a.m. on cold winter mornings when the air freezes your lungs immediately walking out the door, I always made a big glass of steaming hot tomato soup so I could drink it on the way to work. Story 8: Cabbage in all forms. I hated it growing up, but char some green cabbage and drizzle with olive oil, salt, and a tiny bit of balsamic vinegar. Delicious. Story 9: I remember going to visit my mother, and she asked me what I would like for dinner. I replied liver, onions, and Brussels sprouts. I knew I was a man. Story 10: Steak. As a child, it was served well done and cooked 15 minutes longer just to be sure there was not a single bacterium left. Now I know that medium rare is a proper cooking method. Story 11: Beans, chickpeas, and Brussels sprouts. I hated legumes and the bitterness of Brussels sprouts. Now I eat legumes almost daily, and I have a pack of frozen Brussels sprouts in my fridge. I've noticed that my taste grows more like my parents as I was growing up. I used to hate our family food for being poor Appalachian food, but now that's what I crave and love. I made a pot of soup beans the other day, which child me would have loathed. Story 12: Brussels sprouts. As a child, they were tiny bitter cabbages from hell. As an adult, roasted with garlic, I would fight someone for the last one. Story 13: Raw tomatoes in anything except sandwiches. Mayonnaise except sandwiches. I don't know. I'm weird about my sandwiches. Now I eat tomatoes in everything possible, including on a burger with mayonnaise. When I was a kid, I could never. Story 14: Squash, zucchini, any squash. To be fair, we always had frozen mush. It is so good baked or roasted. Story 15: Dalmades. My father gave me some at a restaurant when I was about 5 or 6, and I thought they were the worst thing ever. Now they are one of my favorite snacks. Story 16: I hated it with a passion for 35 years. I tried to like it over and over, hoping one day I would experience the joy I saw on other people's faces. But it never clicked. No one believed me when I said I didn't like chocolate. I remember being 10 at a friend's sleepover. Her dad made pancakes the next morning. I told him I didn't like chocolate chips or anything chocolate. Really? But he made every pancake with chocolate chips anyway and told me to just eat around them. The taste was always the same. Bitter, clinging to the back of my tongue. Milk chocolate, Oreos, chocolate chip cookies, chocolate ice cream didn't matter. I hated them all. Then I had my first child. And suddenly I could tolerate chocolate. After my second, I love it now. Story 17: I honestly cannot remember a food I did not like. Even as a kid, I have always been an adventurous eater, and I am rarely disappointed. As an adult, the only thing I can say I do not like is curry. I never had it as a kid. I am certain that it is because I have never had it made properly, but I have never had any I liked. Story 18: My mom used to boil Brussels sprouts, and the smell was so awful I refused to touch them. But now I toss a handful on the grill, and I am in culinary heaven. Story 19: I can think of 2: Indian food and sushi. I was well into my 20s before I even tasted them. Silly me. Story 20: I disliked green beans so much that I disliked all green beans until I got older and could distinguish the difference. Story 21. Onions. This next story is a bit gross, so beware. When I was around 9 or 10, I blamed onions when one night I woke up around 2 a.m. violently and explosively vomiting. So much so that the pressure made it come out of my nose. Thinking back, I realized how dangerous that was. The vomiting woke me up. I essentially woke up mid-vomit. Earlier that day, I had eaten a big burger after feeling sick most of the day at school. I remember the onions smelled a bit off, but you know onions, sometimes they're tough on the nose, unlike caramelized onions. Naturally, I blamed the onions, not myself, for overeating. It turns out it wasn't the onions but indigestion from something I ate at school. Yet I kept eating. A few hours after the burger, in the late evening, I ate eggs with chorizo, which, as you might know, is very greasy and only added to the problem. I loved going to that burger place, but I stopped going altogether after that night. I blamed the place and the onions. I must not have gone for about 7 years until I started taking my future wife back when we were in high school. I remember avoiding onions like the plague. I didn't want to throw up again. In reality, it was indigestion. The onions were innocent. Now, I eat onions any which way. They're one of my favorite ingredients. The key is to not overeat in general. Story 22. Brussels sprouts and beets. We ate the frozen sprouts and they were overcooked and watery. Then I discovered roasted fresh Brussels sprouts. They are amazing. Beets are something I have just developed a taste for, I guess. Story 23. Snake gourd. I do not know why, but the gourd family vegetables were never among the vegetables I ate as a child. I still do not eat most of them, but snake gourd was the one vegetable I completely changed my mind about. Story 24. The older I get, the more I yearn for coffee. I am 29 years old and still have not bought a coffee pot, but I know it is only a matter of time. Young me would never in a million years believe it. Story 25. I liked bacon and ham, but not pork, mainly because whenever I had it, it was dry and overcooked. Story 26. You kidding? So much. Onions, mushrooms, literally every other kind of pizza that is not just cheese. I could keep going. Story 27. Those little cups of sliced oranges used to make me so mad if they were given to me instead of something like chips, but now I find them delicious. Story 28. Cheese. It turns out I am just not a big fan of the $6 always on sale block of marble cheese my parents always bought. Story 29. Feta and eggs. Things I still will never eat. Broad beans, pea, and ham soup. It is just too deep in me. The disdain is real. Story 30. Gravy. Seems mom could not make good gravy. It was runny, then gloopy, too salty or starchy with no flavor. Now I realize that good gravy is the nectar of the gods. Story 31. Brussels sprouts, but to be fair, having them steamed ruins them. Now cooked with bacon and baked in the oven in a cast iron skillet. Game changer. Story 32. Siamese dim sum. Salad. Broccoli. Someone introduced us to eating it with melted cheese whiz. Congee. Sandwiches. Western sandwiches are much better than what I had as a kid. Story 33. So many. I was a very picky eater. Some that come to mind immediately are lots of vegetables such as bell peppers, mushrooms, broccoli, and onions, as well as seafood. Story 34. Cabbage. My family served the worst cabbage. Every cabbage I have now is better than the cabbage I had growing up. Story 35. Tomatoes. You can put that on almost everything. Roasted, pico de gallo, wedges with salt sprinkled on them, a slice of tomato, and a sardine on a Triscuit. Story 36. Literally nothing. I still hate all the things I disliked as a child and was forced to eat. This list includes only vegetables, although I never developed a taste for salt and vinegar potato chips. Story 37. Isn't it funny that your parents used to say, "You won't know if you like it until you try it"? But when I say the same thing about my vindaloo, it's a whole different story. Story 38. Used to hate spicy food. Now I can barely eat something without thinking, would hot sauce go well with this? Story 39. Onions, liver, green peppers, tomatoes. I still hate liver and tomatoes. My mom put big hunks of onions, green peppers, and tomatoes in everything. I would never touch liver and still will not. But I got over the onions and green peppers. I love every sauce made with tomatoes but do not like them in their normal form. Story 40. Green vegetables. Well, most vegetables really, once I learned that they did not have to be boiled into mush. However, I am still not a fan of green beans no matter how you prepare them. Story 41. Over easy or runny eggs. I wasn't a terribly picky child, but for some reason, I found the texture to be slimy and greatly preferred my eggs to always be scrambled. Now, I love a runny yolk. Story 42. Love? German-style red cabbage. I detested certain vegetables as a kid. Broccoli, cauliflower, lima beans, and mushrooms. Those were 4 of the 6 foods I wouldn't touch growing up. Otherwise, I wasn't a picky eater and pretty much ate and enjoyed anything. Liver was one of my favorite meals. The 6th food was butternut squash. My mom pureed it to a runny mashed potato consistency and served it with spices reminiscent of what everyone thinks of as pumpkin spice. I couldn't stomach it, and to this day, pumpkin spice anything brings back memories of being stuck at the table for ages until I would eat a bite or 2 of the squash. So, I avoid pumpkin spice products and actual pumpkin pie if I can help it. Story 43. Spinach. I was only ever served mushy, overcooked spinach as a child. Mom liked to put it in soup. I avoided spinach as much as possible until I was in college and found it raw in the cafeteria salad bar. I still prefer raw spinach unless it is in quiche or pasta. Story 44. Anything made in a slow cooker. My mother would just throw unseasoned meat and vegetables in that device for 10 hours and force us to eat it. It was not until my wife showed me how great it can be if you just season your food. Deborah. Story 45. Rye bread and Swiss cheese. I hated both as a child. Then when I was 19, my boyfriend made me take a bite of his Reuben, and it was like a choir of angels descended from heaven and landed directly in my face. Story 46. All of it. I was a picky eater as a child, and now I eat everything. Fortunately, I have the genetics to support this. Story 47. Asparagus. When I was a kid, everyone in my family cooked it to death. Now I love it on the grill with olive oil, freshly ground pepper, and sea salt. Story 48. Asparagus. My mom served the canned asparagus, which tasted awful. However, fresh steamed or barbecued asparagus is delicious. Story 49. Upma. Also known as uppit or uppitu. It is basically semolina or rava porridge. I used to hate it as a kid and avoided eating it. But now I make it all the time. It is so easy to make, very filling, and does not spoil easily. Apparently, the dish was invented during the post-British era when Indian women began extensively going to work. The dish really cuts down breakfast time. It is a popular saying in my area. You hate it as a kid but love it as an adult. I do not love it yet, but I make it all the time. Story 50. Green beans. As a kid, it was like trying to get me to eat something terrible, but now I will eat a whole cast iron skillet of fried greens. Story 51. Pizza. Mostly because my dad used to order only supreme pizzas that had olives, mushrooms, and capsicum on them. Once I found out I could order margarita, meat lovers, and pepperoni pizzas, my life changed. Story 52. Tomatoes. I pretty much refused to eat any food made with tomatoes, aside from pizza, throughout much of my childhood. I still do not like raw sliced tomato unless it is a really good tomato, but I was missing out on everything else. Story 53. Mushrooms. Asparagus. Lamb. Brussels sprouts. Peas. Multigrain bread. Eating items not covered in ketchup. Story 54. Cabbage is slowly starting to grow on me at 36. I am realizing the person who always made it, my grandmother, just made it terribly. It was not a general taste issue. Story 55. Vegetables in general. I realize I love either crunchy vegetables or stew and gravy vegetables. Soggy and squishy vegetables do not boost my appetite. I just did not know any better and categorized all vegetables the same as a kid. It was not until I started looking on YouTube for recipes that I realized my mom overcooked lots of vegetables. Story 56. I truly loved my grandfather, but he cooked the worst eggplant possible and I hated it so much as a kid. However, nowadays I love eggplants in both Asian and Mediterranean dishes. Story 57. Dressing on salad. I used to think it was gross, especially ranch dressing. After coronavirus disease 2019, my tastes and preferences changed, and now ranch dressing is a favorite of mine on salads, as is honey mustard. Story 58. However, there are still a shocking number of things I cannot even look at, let alone bring myself to eat. Story 59. Onions. I did not like them as a child. I thought they smelled bad and ruined anything they touched. I also thought the taste was bitter. Now I cannot get enough. I add them to everything and ask for extra if possible. Story 60. Olives. I hated them as a kid and refused to try them again until about 2015 or 2016. Then I gave them another try and never looked back. I really love olives now. Story 61. Flan or pudding. I hated the texture and the caramel taste, probably because I did not have a well-made one during childhood. Now I am quite fond of it despite not having a sweet tooth. Story 62. Almost every other food which I discriminated against because of color or the way the vegetables were presented or cut. Story 63. The vast majority of food I did not like as a kid was because the adult preparing it did a horrible job, typically by overcooking it. For example, broccoli and asparagus should be bright green, not gray or taken from a can. Although canned food does have a place in the world, chicken does not need to be cooked until it becomes dry and tough. Story 64. Fried onion. When I was a child, the smell would make me ill. I learned to love them on holiday in Majorca. Lots of cheap lager, the smell of the burger bar outside the British pub. I have loved them since. Story 65. I hated celery. I started to detect it in the smallest amounts, and it would ruin entire dishes. Eventually, through exposure, it became tolerable, and now I do not mind it. Story 66. Asparagus, mushrooms, and onions took way too long for me to like. I didn't eat onions until I was 16. Story 67. Onions, eggs, and spinach. I didn't hate eggs as a kid, but I definitely wasn't too fond of them. I really didn't like onions or spinach. Now I love all three and use them in my cooking regularly. Story 68. Meatloaf, pork chops, asparagus, cauliflower, and many other vegetables. Blue cheese, salami. The list goes on. Story 69. I was a notoriously picky eater as a kid. I am still fairly picky, but significantly less so. Things I actually eat now: onions, garlic, broccoli, asparagus, green beans, peas, lettuce, some kinds of salad, actual spices, meat other than ham or beef, bananas, blueberries. The list probably goes on, but I think the point stands. Story 70. Onion, specifically raw onion, I have always loved it cooked. I still do not like large amounts, but a bit in coleslaw or a salad is fine. Story 71. Tomatoes and blue cheese. I am still waiting to start liking olives and bananas. They are okay if flavored in something, but I cannot eat them on their own. Story 72. So many foods. I was a fussy eater all the way up until going to university. I've come to realize in later years that my fussiness came from my mother being even worse. I was a nuggets and chips with a dollop of ketchup kind of kid. Then I lived away from home and discovered how great almost all food is. Now, I am the person who sees something I do not recognize and instantly wants to try it no matter what. If it ends up being tasty, I then want to learn how to make it for myself. Food is so good. Story 73. Lots of things. One thing that people seem to not believe is that I really hated fresh coriander, also known as cilantro. It tasted like soap to me, but then I got used to it and now I love it. That goes against people's belief that it's a gene causing that bad taste and that it's just how it is. They will never like it and it's not about being picky. Other things I learned to love are red wine, hummus, beer, goat cheese, really hot spicy food, olives, and sour things like vinegar-based salad dressing. Story 74. I hated anything mushy, including mashed potatoes. Today, I appreciate well-prepared mashed potatoes as a side to lots of things, such as meatloaf. Story 75. Good bread. I used to spend a lot of time at my grandparents' house. They would make sandwiches for lunch with all the fixings and some wheat bread. I hated it, but as time went on, I got used to it. Now I love some good bread. Story 76. Mashed potatoes. I know, I just could not deal with the texture when I was a child. For my grown-up child, it was the same thing. We both love it now, though. Story 77. Anything that was always boiled and unseasoned served to me as a child. I have since discovered there are better ways to cook. Story 78. So many things. As a child, I was very picky, but after watching shows like Top Chef, I became adventurous about trying new foods. Cooking is one of my hobbies. To name a couple, corn and ice cream. I never hated the flavor of ice cream. I did not like the temperature because I have sensitive teeth. I adjusted over time. Story 79. Salmon and other seafood. I was always so grossed out by salmon, but I tried it as a young adult and went through a phase where I could not get enough. If it was on the menu at a restaurant, that is what I was ordering. Story 80. I used to go fishing, clean the fish, and then give it to a family member to eat since I did not like the taste of fish. I then lived in Japan for 2 years and my taste buds had to change. Now fish is delicious. Story 81. You are all going to be shocked to learn I hated steak as a kid. My mom would take it directly out of the fridge and put it under the broiler. The meat was like shoe leather. As a result, I rarely cooked red meat. It was not until my 50s that I learned how to cook it properly. Story 82. Brussels sprouts as a child tasted like punishment, but now I roast them with olive oil and garlic as if they are gourmet. It is funny how taste buds develop over time. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.